campaigners, as the local authorities and organisations, we had raised concerns and we had said that this is not a good idea and it's not a good practice to remove people from their homes into hotel accommodations during a global pandemic. And unfortunately, in May of 2020, we lost one of our friends, Adnan, in the Maryhill Hotel, who committed suicide as a result of the ongoing issues that he had faced in the hotel. And a month later, we had lost another friend of ours, Frederick Dean, in the Parkin Hotel, who had called the Home Office more than 72 times, pleading for help, to say that his condition is not good, that he actually wants to be returned back to Sudan, and that he does not want to be in here because of what's going on and the experiences that he's having in the hotel. And that his plea for help was ignored, and unfortunately he was shot dead by the police while he as the news had called, had attacked the fellow 6 people in the hotel, including a police officer and the 2 hotel staff and 2 other people who were staying in the hotel. And one of the first headlines that during that day I remember is the news outlets immediately saying that there is a terrorism attack, there is a terrorist attack happening in Glasgow, which again shows the racism and the racist headlines that immediately could occur after such an horrifying incident where a person had lost their life, and the only person who had lost their life was again a person who was seeking asylum and refuge. And since then, unfortunately, the usage of hotels has been expanding across the country, where we see the hotels being used in England, where they're actually using barracks as well as a way of hosting people. And in Scotland at the moment, the Maryhill Hotel, the same hotel that Adnan passed away, is still being used. And it's not just for single people, actually there are families in that hotel, there are children in that hotel. And the similar hotels is being used also in Perth, Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh, Falkirk and Iskilbride. So there is many hotels which is being used at the moment. And I think this was a long-term plan as part of the Nationality and Borders Act, as a way of normalising for people to put into hotel accommodation so that people are no longer being present in the local areas. There is an inquiry which will be launching this Sunday called the Asylum Inquiry Scotland, looking into the death of people during the pandemic in Glasgow and in Scotland, and especially looking at the accommodation. And sadly, with the new proposal, Nationality and Borders Bill, which is now an act from last year, what we're witnessing, I would say, and I'm sure everybody in the panel would agree, is one of the most inhumane policies and one of the most inhumane immigration law that is going to be implemented, especially talking about offshore asylum centres, which they're thinking of doing in Rwanda, which they are going to be doing from the looks of it. And just last week, they tried to use the flight to send the first group of people to Rwanda. And just looking at the business behind all of these policies is incredibly outrageous. They were trying to deport initially up to 100 people, but because of the, I would say maybe, as they called it, the record lawyers they had mentioned, because of the lawyers, this number was reduced to 8 people, and even the 8 people, they continued and insisted that they would be deported to Rwanda, and they were spending about $500,000 on 8 people on a private, by using a private flight to send people. And when you look at the figures of numbers of people arriving to UK and compared to the other countries around the world where people are actually, when they are seeking asylum and refuge, it's not even similar to any of the numbers. The majority of the countries, when once there's a war, they flee as the neighbouring countries, such as in Turkey, there's over 5 million Syrian community, and also in Lebanon, and in Pakistan, and Jordan. So when we look at the countries that people are fleeing to, it's the neighbouring countries initially. And when you look at the number of people arriving to UK, it's very minimal. At the moment, if I'm not wrong, you can correct me, it's around 70,000 people who are seeking asylum and in the asylum process. And even those 70,000 people, they're making life extremely difficult, and they're trying to send a message by creating these laws to say that refugees are not welcome in our country. And the recent news that they also published was as part of the Nationality and Borders Act, was to use a nanotechnology in the seas, where they will be sending shockwaves to push away the boats, which when people are arriving here, which when you think about it is absolutely inhumane. And the recent one was Pinar Aksu announcing that new people arriving, they will be having electronic tags on their feet when, as a way of monitoring people. So there's lots of unfortunate things happening at the moment, especially with the Act becoming a law. It's going to be very difficult to challenge some of the aspects, and I think that's why we would be needing a lot of solidarity. We would be needing to raise awareness of the inhumane policies that's happening, because it's not just targeting people seeking asylum and refuge, it will be targeting all of us. This is just the beginning of it. Then there's going to be the protest bill that they're discussing, and they're going to be introducing a lot of various protests to take away our right and dignity as a citizen in this country. I'd like to just end by saying that, as Daniel mentioned earlier, there are campaigns that you can support and you can raise awareness about, especially one of the key campaigns we've actually worked with the PCS union, which was the first union to work with to talk about the Right to Work campaign with the Lift the Ban coalition, where we discussed about the skills that people bring when they're in the asylum process, and what happens to people when they are banned from working for, let's say, more than 2 years, 5 years. Those skills going to waste, where actually people, if they were able to work, they would contribute to society, they would pay their taxes, and they would just become part of the community and continue fulfilling their life. So that's one of the key campaigns that is running, called the Lift the Ban coalition, and one of the group that I run, Min Voices group, we've been really actively doing running information sessions about why it's important and what we can do as well. I could talk more, but I know that Amar needs to leave as well, so I'll stop here. Thank you so much.